Good morning and good afternoon to everyone who's joined the webinar for pre-fill. My name is Joel Harris. I know most of you, some of you I might not know. We're going to spend about 30 to 45 minutes today going through the pre-fill service that is offered by PayQuiq. Several of you have used it. Several of you have used our statement system, and some of you are brand new to both of those. Let me do a few housekeeping things first. This is a webinar, so it's me speaking, and then you have a chat box down at the bottom left of your screen. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to type in a question, and I will either answer it immediately or wait until there's a logical break in our session. Also, just so I can make sure you hear me, if you wouldn't mind just typing in the chat box that you can hear me, or yes, or something along those lines. I just want to make sure that my voice is clear, and looks like we're getting good responses. Okay, so I think we're in good shape. Again, welcome. The webinar is for the pre-fill service, and let me give you a little background on the pre-fill service. First of all, what is it? Essentially, it's a content-based emailing. So most of you use a variety of email services like Constant Contact, where you're sending out messages to your members or to others, and those are all nice emails. But what we've done is we've done it a step further and allow you to create what we define as content-based by member. So a good example of that was our first service along those lines, which was our statement emailing. Many of you use the statement emails. Essentially what that does is it allows you to send out an email specifically to a member or to all your members with their detailed statement information, and then they can pay the statement balances right from their email. It makes a very nice, very efficient way to send out billing and also to improve cash flow. So what we did is we said, okay, we can do that same thing by combining that function with what we've built in our forms management system. So for example, this is our demo website. You might have a tour school registration form. So let's bring that. It's coming up here in just a second. But essentially, it's a typical form that most of our synagogues use. In this case, it's for allowing people to register their children for Torah school. And as you all know, these are relatively long forms. And so when they're either sent out via an email or sent out or accessed through the website, it takes a fair amount of time to complete the form in its entirety, especially if you have several children. And if your registration forms are longer than others. So what we did is we said, well, why won't we do the same thing we do with statements and pre-fill the registration forms with data that was either completed in the prior registration process from the prior year or uploaded data from another source. So from that perspective, we created the pre-fill. So let me show you an example of a Torah school registration pre-fill. So I'm going to go into PayQuiq, into my forms system. And I've already got the Torah school registration created. Obviously, you just saw it. So here it is here in my PayQuiq forms list. And over on the right, in my action boxes, is the down arrow, which brings me to the pre-fill. Now, what I want to do here, for example, is go to Manage Pre-fill Data. Okay. And here are some pre-fill members that I set up previously. So these can either be loaded from a prior registration or loaded, as I said, from an external data source. And there's actually a third option I'll tell you about in just a minute. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an email that's going to go out to the members. So I want to create the content of that email. And then I want to select that email, and I'll go back to the email process in just a minute. Once I've created the email, I pick it here from my email form list. Okay. and I can either send out the emails automatically to the members, or I can send myself a preview email so that I can see what the form looks like. Okay, so I've already done that, so we don't have to take the time to wait for an email. So I'm going to go to my outbox and find my Torah School registration email. So essentially, this is what it's going to look like. You can create whatever content, and I'll show you that in just a minute. It's basically, it's a new online Torah School registration service to enable you to receive your prior registration information and simply edit and resubmit. Okay, and then it says click here or view here for your registration. So this is that same registration form that's blank in the website, but if I click on student one, all of the information that was there originally is now in the form. So all I have to do is go through it and say what information may have changed. Okay, so maybe instead of Wednesday night, I want to switch to Monday night. And I can also select my tuition payment. Okay, so not only are they able to register with the information, but they're also able to set up their payment process. Okay, so I've got no other information here. Let me take a look at my family information. This is all the same information I had from last year. My permissions are all the same. Maybe I'll add one permission. Okay, possibly I want to upload an image. And now I can also set up my recurring payments. Okay, so here I've got monthly. I'm going to set up maybe 10. And for those of you that are familiar with aren't familiar with their recurring system, you can limit the number of months. Several synagogues for school registration may limit it, instead of the full fiscal year, they may limit it to something like 6 months. Okay, so I'm going to agree here, and essentially I'm going to fill out the rest of the payment information. This is all test data, so I don't necessarily want to fill it out correctly. Okay, so I'm going to actually make a payment using a checking account. And okay, so now I'm ready to register for my student, and away it goes. Oops, I forgot to put my last name. Okay, so again, this works just like a normal form, but the biggest difference is it's a much faster and more efficient way for your members to register or to use our form system when the data is pre-completed. So you can see it was approved, and essentially it's going to be set up into our recurring system that I'll show you in just a minute. Switch back here. All right. I've got a couple of questions here, so I'm going to take a quick break and look at these questions. Is the recurring payment aspect optional? And the next question, if you're allowing recurring payments on this form, will it have any effect on the statements we email out monthly? Both good questions. Okay, so let me just show you what happens. But by the way, the recurring payment is optional, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we do that. So if you created a form and you did not want the recurring to be set up, that's part of the form management process. So I'm here at the form manager in my editor. I'm going to go to the settings called recurring. And if I did not want recurring, I simply would never set it up where it says yes here. It would say no. Okay, so yeah, you do not have to have recurring. And I'll show you some other pre-filled examples that don't even have payments in them. So, and if you need information on how to set up the recurring or do statements, we can talk to you at a later point. Josh, if you're doing recurring payments, actually what will happen, Josh, is that, or for everyone, the recurring payments is essentially a service that can be used by statements, by created by forms, or created by somebody administratively. So the answer is you can have, let's say, in this case, Joe Goldman set up his recurring payments for his tuition. You could have another recurring payment for that same person for their annual pledge payments. So they can either be they can be separate. You could also go in, I guess, and edit one of them and combine the two. I wouldn't necessarily suggest it because one could be considered, taxable, and the other one, or tax deductible, and the other one might not. But that's really purely up to you. But again, here is, that recurring payment, or here's one of the recurring payments that were set up in a prior form, but they're all kept separately. Oh, looks like Danielle answered the question I was talking. Okay, how is the pre-filled data imported? All right, let me show you. There's really three sources of data that you can use to pre-fill our forms. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the form management system. Okay, the first way is by simply going into the manage pre-fill, and you see right here where it says load data from past responses. So essentially, if you've got a tour school registration form that was used last year, all you would need to do is go here and click on load data from past responses, and it will load all of the data from any prior use of that tour school registration form. And then once it's loaded, you can simply go in here and say, click on the magnifying glass to view the data. Okay. All right, so here's that same data I showed you. All right. So that's the easiest way. However, it may not fit. For example, in this case, let's say that this person is no longer a student at the synagogue. So you could go in here and delete it as well. Okay. So the easiest way is just to click load data from past responses. Again, that addresses some of the needs, but possibly not all the needs, especially if you're using it for the first time. So if you are using it for the first time, you can do what we call download a template. So here's a download a pre-filled template, which essentially is an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to go ahead and download the template, and it's going to create an Excel-based spreadsheet with all of the data fields that you need to fill out in order to upload later into PayQuiq. So for example, we need the first name, last name, email. And then I'm going to show you this next field, and it looks a little complicated. So ignore the first part of this description. We use that as a tag into our database system. It's after the period or after the dot that the field name is clear. So in this case, we would put student one first name, student one Hebrew name, which essentially follows the flow of the form. So let's say you were using Rekefet or Haverware or some other student management system or school management system. Essentially, you would do an export of that file or that data in a format, preferably exactly in this layout. Okay, and then once you do that, you put the data in that same format. And here's an example of that. Okay, so again, I've just taken the template with its various data fields, which are matching up to the data fields in the form, and I've prepared the data. Okay, once I've prepared the data, I can essentially, I'm going to go back to here. I go back to my manage prefill, and I click to upload the form data file. Okay, so once I do that, it's going to ask me to point somewhere in my computer where the data file is, browse it, and upload it. Now, if I have 2 or 3 files, what I could do is click, once I've uploaded the first one, I go to upload the second one, make sure you click do not clear old pre-fill form data. Okay, so you can append 2 or 3 files if they come from different sources to create your pre-fill essentially database. Okay, so that's how you have to that's how you would create it from an external source. A third way to create it is if you had data from a prior form, but you wanted to edit the data before it uploaded into PayQuiq. Essentially what you would do is go to your reports, form data. You would export, here I have the Torah School registration, okay? And I'm essentially going to run it just like that. Okay. I'm going to export it to Excel, and I'm going to get the form data. Now it is not in exactly the same uh, data format as the template, but it's very easy to modify. So for example, in the form data, since these were prior transactions, they've got the prior transaction date, whether it was approved or not, and the amount. So you essentially go in here and get rid of this data by deleting the columns. Okay. All right. And now the data is essentially in the same format as the form. So without using the title, because this doesn't have the data descriptor that we need, you just grab the data, copy it, and then you would paste it right into the template that we created earlier to get this information. So it's very easy. Now, the reason you might want to do that, though, as opposed to just loading from prior responses, is you might want to go through and edit the data before it's uploaded for information that you might know logically is not current and needs to be updated. So that gives you a tool to update data from prior responses. Okay? All right, so that's essentially how the data is uploaded. And this is meant to be a high-level webinar. Certainly, if you need help doing it, we're happy to give you more guidance. Okay, so I'm gonna reduce that down. Okay. Okay. Get rid of my spreadsheet here. Okay. So let me give you a few more examples of how some of our synagogues have used the pre-fill. Another good example, one of our synagogues is in the process of using, I should say. They want to get their member information updated. Okay, so here they created a form called Member Information Update, and I'll just show you what that form looks like. So they've got their member information, their member name, Hebrew names. They got all their children, Yortzeit information, emergency contact. So this is essentially the information you might have on a member, and frequently you would get that when they initially become a member, and then sometimes it gets updated, sometimes it doesn't. So this is just a tool that can be used maybe to send out once a year or something, where you create this form. You would export the data from, let's say, your member management system like Rakefet or Haverware or Blackbaud, depending on what you use. And you would do the same thing. You would go into the forms list. Now, in this case, since you're creating the data from an external source, you would download the pre-fill template. And again, then you would set up, export the data from Haverware or whatever, and in the format that's set up in your form, and you would load the data in. Once it's there, again, you would go back and upload it into PayQuiq. You would create an email, and I'm going to show you how those emails are created right now. So I'm going to go ahead and edit my member information update email. Okay, so I went to services email, and this form I created, or this email I created earlier. If I wanted to create one from scratch, essentially I would create email here at the blue box, and it would give me a blank email. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start typing the email. This is, again, works just like our statement system. So for those of you that have done statements, you know how to do it. You would put dear, and then we use these descriptors so that you can have variable names in the email. So this might end up being dear John or what have you. So you would always use this descriptor. If you need information, it's always down here at the bottom. So you would just grab that for first name. And if you wanted to have the last name, you could do the same thing. Just grab it here. So instead of this saying Dear John, it's going to say Dear John Abrams. we actually have different ways you can do this, but this is just an example of how you can do it. So then you write the content of your email, and then you would always have a link, something like click here to view member information. These are very easy to create. Essentially, I'm going to create a new one down here so you can see it. So I'm going to write in the text of what I want. Click here to view information. And then I want to hyperlink it to, it's very simple. Down here is what we call our form link key. Okay, so I'm going to copy this $$ form link key. Okay. And if you're familiar with how linking works, you would highlight the text, go to the link button in the editor. Okay. And instead of putting in the URL, all you have to do is put in $$ form link key. Again, it's down at the bottom. And now that's a hyperlink in your email. So when they click on this link, it will bring them to their specific information for their email. So now I've created the email. I'm going to go back to my pre-fill service. I'm going to go ahead and send out. I'm going to do actually a preview email right now. So I'm going to manage my pre-fill. I'm going to select my member information update. I'm going to send a preview to myself just to make sure it looks the way I want it to look. I'm going to select one of my members, and my email was sent successfully. I'm going to go to my email box. Let's go ahead and put it in here. Okay, there it is. Okay, and so it's the same content. Here's my link. I'm going to click on this, and it's going to have all the information that I uploaded. Okay, maybe I changed my email address, so it's change it there. Same number of children, and by the way, you can have unlimited number here, so it doesn't really matter. Emergency contacts, I just want to check, make sure that's right. Yes, that information is correct. So I simply fill in the rest of this information and send register. Okay. So I've now just updated my member information. Very simple, very straight. Oops, I had a required field in there. My mistake. You probably don't want to have required fields like that. Obviously, if there's only one child. So that's a simple edit in the form builder. Okay, so that's essentially that's how the member information update would work. Switch over to yeah. Okay. For member renewal, could we pre-fill their current dues level? And Kathy, I'll get to your question in just a second. So Josh, let me just answer that question by showing you another example of a pre-fill product that one of our synagogues used, or pre-fill form that one of our synagogues built what they called their fair share commitment form. And essentially what they did is they built a form that said, your annual pledge period is now. So essentially they wrote a letter, and what they did is they put in last year's contribution was X. Based on our budget, we ask that you consider a fair share pledge increase of at least, or a fair share pledge of Y. So maybe they had a 10% increase from one year to the next. So last year was 3,000. So this year their pledge will be 3,300. So that's all data unique to each member that they created in a form, and then in the data. And they chose to put in whatever format they wanted to. I'm going to show you how you do this in just a second. Okay? So this is their form. So now I'm going to go to the forms list. I'm going to do the same thing I just showed you for the member update. I'm going to go to manage prefill, and I'm going to select my email. I've already pre-written the email. I'm going to send a preview. And what you'll see here is the same thing where, and I actually did this already. Okay, so here's my email. Dear John, our finance committee, et cetera, et cetera. Just a little bit of background on what the current budget requirements are. Click here to view the member information. So this is a specific email sent to each individual temple member. So this is an example. Their particular contribution last year was 3,600. Essentially, when they created their spreadsheet to upload, they pulled in the annual renewal amount that for that particular member, and then had a second column in the spreadsheet that multiplied that times a percentage to get this value. Okay, so now this is just demonstrating what their values were, and now it allows them to put in their fair share commitment for this year. So maybe this year they're going to go ahead and agree to what the synagogue did. They're also showing their current balance. Okay, so that was also pulled from, in this case, I believe it was from Rakefet, and they put that in there. If the annual building fund was appropriate, they would put that in there. And essentially, whatever other information they would want as part of their pledge information, it would allow them to also to do the recurring. Again, this is optional. And in one fell swoop, they were able to put it all together in one single form. Let me go back to a few questions. How do you do this for a group of people like RS families or for all family members? Well, what you can do, let's say you only wanted to do one group. The way it works is, well, you could do it a couple of different ways. Number one, you could put them all in one spreadsheet, so it doesn't really matter. Or you could do it in segments. So you could have the religious school families, send those out, and maybe a few weeks later, augment that and send out, upload another file. Or what you could do is just create two separate forms, one for RS families and one for all others, and keep them separate. You got different flexibilities there. In the case of RS families versus other family members, I might do two separate forms, even though the forms are identical. But that allows you to keep your data a little bit more separate. Well, actually, do we have examples of the forms? We can actually send you some examples by loading them into your form library. So Danielle, she's on the call. Maybe I'll have her copy some of the forms over to your library so you can get an example, see an example of how these are done. On the fair share commitment, I'm glad you like that. We actually, a couple of synagogues have used it last year, and I think it worked pretty well. I think they're going to try to tune it a little bit because they want to put in more information as opposed to just a flat rate here or a flat amount here. But that's kind of how things evolve. Is they used it, now next year they want to use it a little bit with a little bit more detail. At this point, again, I'm going to open up. Are there any other questions or any specific area? I've got one more part that I wanted to show you, but it's again more about the forms builder than anything else. You don't check the box, the rest disappear. Why would you receive the repeat fees? Okay, let me make sure I understand the question. The screen with the list of pre-fill listings, you said if you don't check the box, the rest disappear. Why would you keep or delete those other pre-fills listed? Okay, the reason why you would want to keep them for some period of time is once you send out the email, you need to keep the data in that list for the period of time that people are going to be accessing that email. So what we see is it usually takes them about 2 weeks before they expect a new email. So if you upload a file, you send out your emails, and then the next day you upload another file and you didn't append that new file to the prior file, the people that receive the email, when they click on it, there won't be any data there because this is meant to be to keep fresh data in it. So for example, in our the people that use the statement system, the statements are uploaded today and they're accessible throughout the month until the new statement files are loaded. Um, so, but again, if you're appending the data, you don't want to delete the data of an email that was sent out recently because when they click on the link, they won't be able to find their data. So that's why you would append it if it's not, if it's current data, but you're just appending the information. Is there a list of, sorry, my questions are scrolling faster than I'm reading them. Give me just a second. Oh, Amy says she has more questions than when it started. I hope that's a positive thing. And again, the intent of this webinar is to kind of open up thoughts and discussions and see how it could apply to you. It wasn't really meant to be a full training session. We could do a more thorough pre-filled training session in another webinar where we might take more time for people that don't know how to use the system yet. We're happy to do that. And depending on your feedback, we will set up another session. Um, let's see, Kathy, is there a list? Is there a list of data spreadsheets, or do we make our own? How do you match our own forms? Not all forms are the same. Okay, so let me go back to how this works. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my forms manager. Whenever I create a form, okay, essentially the form creates a database structure based on the fields that you've set up. So for example, I'm going to go to my fair share commitment. And these are all fields, for those of you that are familiar with how to build forms, these are all fields that you would build. Now, as you've built them, it creates a database structure. Now, that same database structure is what's generated in that downloaded template that I showed you a few minutes ago. So, for example, I'm gonna change this. Let me see here. I'm gonna add a field, right? I'm just going to add a single line text field right here, right before building fund. I'm going to call that general donation. So let's say I want to make an impromptu donation. Actually, I do because I don't want to do that. What I want to do is add a payment field. Okay. I'm going to call it a general use donation. Okay. I'm not going to make it required. Okay, so I've just added that field to the fair share commitment, and I'm going to save that. Okay. So this is all very dynamic. So I just modified the form. Now I want to go in and create my spreadsheet template or generate it. Okay, so I'm going to open that up. Okay, so again, this is what we showed you before. These are all the fields. And now what I want to do is go find that field that said general here somewhere. I skipped it somewhere. There it is. Okay. So what happens is whenever I modify my form, when I go then to download the template, it will have that modification in it. So each of these downloaded templates are created as part of the form creation. Okay. So again, you can change the form. Now, what you can't do is, let's say you've created a form, you had a form from last year, and you created a new form, or you modified that form this year. If you try to download the data from the prior responses, obviously, since this is a new field, there will be no data from the prior responses here. but all the other data will still remain intact. Okay? So I hope that answered your question about how the templates are created. Um, and let me just go back, if you don't mind, before I forget. I'm going to change that form back to where it was and save that. Okay, so now I have a new fresh form. Amy, if you wouldn't mind just letting Danielle know which forms you might want to, the general idea, is it registration? Is it a fair share commitment? Is it member update? And by the way, you could do this for, let's say you had a regular event and you wanted to send out an email that says you registered for this event last year. Um, so it doesn't have to be like annual membership. It can be virtually anything where you want to send, again, content-based emails that are specific to members or participants. Yes, the, the templates are auto-created. So, and by the way, any of the forms in your database can be pre-filled. Obviously, some wouldn't be appropriate, or there wouldn't be necessarily a need for it. You know, for example, if you had a bowling event, I'm not sure why you would want to use a bowling event pre-filled form. Although you could do it. Let's say you went through your list of members of your let's say your youth group, and you wanted to send them out an email. That's one way you could do it. That might be a proactive way of prompting them to join the event. But again, it's really up to you on how you want to do it. We had one synagogue do the Book of Remembrance. It was a little complicated because the lists can get fairly long, but they sent out last year's Book of Remembrance list and asked them to edit anything that they wanted, add any new ones, and then also prompted them to make an appropriate donation. You could use pre-fill for permission slips, absolutely. All right. Any other questions? What I would like to do is we'll follow up this webinar. Danielle will send out an email to everyone. You can also, at the end of the webinar, there's a quick Q&A response, if you wouldn't mind filling that out, just so we get good feedback on the next webinar we want to put together. We've got a few coming up here shortly, in the next few weeks. On the managed pre-fill page, I saw multiple listings for one person. That's just because that was demo data, simply yeah, samples. Normally you would have one or two, or excuse me, one for each person. Okay. You can go ahead and ask an off topic. I've got scheduled another 7 minutes on this webinar, so I'm happy to answer anything. Let me just see if there's anything else I wanted to show you. By the way, not all of your settings are set to pre-fill. So if you want us to open up pre-fill, send Danielle an email and we can turn that on. I see someone's typing, so I'm just going to, well, I got a bunch of questions at once. Well, currently the pre-fill does not cost anything extra. We have in the past charged for it, but we've decided for now we won't be charging extra for it. We may in the future, depending on the activity and the usage, but for right now, there's no incremental cost. Will be available? Yes, we're always available for questions. At any time, and we'll respond to you as quickly as we can. Any chance that payments could be linked to more than one bank account? Well, that's actually, Carmen, that's a question that we probably need to have a discussion about I assume you mean bank accounts at the synagogue to keep different funds separate. We have had some synagogues do that, and then they went back to keeping it in a single account. But happy to discuss that with you, um, uh, probably offline from the webinar. Okay, if there are no more questions, oh, there's one coming in. Okay, oh, you're welcome. Um, Again, we'll follow up with an email. Any questions, please don't hesitate to respond, and we'll get back to you as quickly as possible. We appreciate the time, and hopefully this was informative, and that you'll find good opportunities to uh, communicate this content-based email process with your members. Again, thanks. Bye for now.